Hello everyone, Canon Lowy here, this time with Path of Exile. Ultimatum League has started, so I wanted to voice my opinions and thoughts of the league mechanic itself, as well as some of the balance changes that came with this league. And I had to redo this intro a bit because it got messed up with the previous recording, so without further ado, roll the tape. Ultimatum League, you find the Trialmaster in any explorable area, and he will offer you some sort of guaranteed item if you defeat all of the enemies, or I think it's actually survive long enough. So of course killing the monsters hopefully will allow you to survive long enough to get the loot. And you will have options of putting modifiers on your arena. So this could include having a cloud that does chaos damage, allowing you and your minions to not deal damage a certain amount of time per an amount of time, and invulnerable shade will inflict ruin on you with melee attacks, and if you get enough stacks then you fail. So how it works is that when you start the arena and survive long enough, you can go further. You can either grab the guaranteed item that you earned, or you can add another modifier to the arena and continue fighting for another guaranteed item. So let's get this started and go with the chaos damage cloud, because that one's fairly easy to avoid from my experience. And I am only level 7, so typically I go through all of the acts of the storyline before I do this review to hopefully get enough of an idea of the league mechanic and what I think of it. But I decided to do that fairly earlier than usual this time around for reasons I'll explain after we're done. So let's get this started. And I'm using Splitting Steel, which is surprisingly a really good starting skill gem. So here, as you can see here, I can just take the 2 jeweler orbs if I want, or I can add another mod, either making the cloud bigger and deal more damage over time, I think. Using a flask hinders you, that's a different one that I haven't seen before, and then the ruin one. And the nice thing is that you can see what the guaranteed item is, so it is completely identified, so you don't need to worry about, oh, is this a really good base, but then get it and then having crappy mods on it. You can see what it is right from the get-go and decide accordingly. So I'm going to go further with that and say flasks hinder me because I haven't really been using flasks. So now we get the amulet. And I think you can get up to 3 encounters with him before it just is completely done and then you can't get any more from it. Unless that changes once you reach higher level areas. But so far I'm pretty sure that it ends after you do 3 times of it. Freezing... So let's do the freezing one, because that's not terrible boots. Wow, that hinder is kind of ridiculous, actually. Okay, so I guess I can get further than that if I'm in a higher level zone, because I do believe when I first tried this out, it would finish around 3 different arenas. So let's keep going. Seeing patches of unhallowed ground will appear, hindering players and cause enemies to resurrect. Get rapidly exploding stuff. Your projectiles fly in random directions and monsters fire projectiles. Additional projectiles. Let's do the cold one.
Death's cold grip is inescapable.
Wow, 5 times this encounter. So one thing to keep in mind is that for every encounter that you do, if your character dies at all in these encounters, you will lose all of the rewards that you have accumulated. And you can preview your rewards as well. So if you have multiple and you forget what you got during some of the earlier encounters, you can look back to see what all you have accumulated. So that is really nice. The encounter area will be much smaller. Chaos damage cloud. This is kind of a tough choice, because that belt isn't, well, I guess it's not amazing, but it isn't terrible for the beginning of the game either. But I think I'll keep going and then just do the larger cloud. Quicksilver Flask kind of mitigates the hinder, at least. So yeah, definitely these encounters, I can imagine, especially in maps, that it can get really hectic. So in the middle, you get your guaranteed rewards, and then you get additional rewards from what the monsters would have dropped. So that is all Ultimatum. And in all honesty, oh, I have a physical damage belt. I guess I'll just hold on to that for now. There we go. So overall, Ultimatum, I really like the league mechanic of Ultimatum, because it's a matter of, if you have a really good build and you're confident in your build's abilities, then you can really get, well, hopefully, some pretty good rewards. Now, of course, like I said, I haven't gotten to maps in this league, if I will, to experience how hectic that gets. And my friend Warmonger has actually gotten to maps at this point already, and he said that sometimes the encounters will have so many rare monsters spawn immediately that you kind of get one-shotted, which doesn't sound like a good time. It reminds me of Delirium back in the day. Delirium League specifically. So overall, I think this mechanic is really good and really fun to interact with. It is kind of disorienting having the game just completely pause in the middle of the action to choose your rewards or whether or not you keep going. That kind of breaks the flow of the combat, but at the same time, I don't really see how they could have done something different for that. So that's just kind of a side note. So overall, this league, in terms of balance changes, they have added a lot of gems that have stuff to do with spending life instead of mana. directly from the skill gems without using the blood magic support. And on top of that, the blood magic support has been split into 2 gems. There's one gem that has to do with life reservation for auras, and then a different one that actually deals with spending life instead of mana for active skills. So a lot of the balance changes have been around mechanics like that, but also on top of Vaal skills. Most of the Vaal skills, as far as I'm aware, have been buffed quite significantly. I think for some reason they nerfed Vaal Cyclone though, which is kind of weird because honestly Vaal Cyclone isn't really that great to use in my opinion, but all of the other ones seem to have gotten a massive buff, as well as making it so that you get more charges for your Vaal skills from dealing damage to unique enemies. Unfortunately though, this ties into the reason why I haven't actually gotten a map this league, is the balance changes around a lot of the meta skills. Skills like Blade Vortex, Toxic Rain, Blade Blast, and Aura Stacking once again. They've pretty much been nerfed across the board. And they even had one specific change that pretty much ruined self-cursing headhunting builds. And as far as I'm aware, using temporal chains to make your headhunting buffs last longer was by far the most ideal way to use a headhunter. So headhunters are, instead of being this super overpowered thing, if used correctly, it's now more of a unique item that, I mean, if you have high enough clear speed to get enough buffs within 20 seconds before some starting to expire, then maybe you can still get it to work, but it's definitely not nearly as good as it used to be. And usually I kind of like meta changes in terms of specifically them buffing other underutilized skills. I prefer that better than just straight up nerfing the meta. And the thing too is that they nerfed most of the meta skills by like at least 20 or 30%. So it wasn't just a small change. So for the most part, those changes didn't necessarily affect me personally, but they affected my future plans. So Warmonger has, well, used to have anyway, it's pretty much useless now, but a self-curse headhunting Blade Vortex build that he really enjoyed, and I thought to myself that maybe once we get enough currency that I might make one for myself. And also they changed one of the Berserker Ascendancy nodes to no longer have Mana Leech and pretty much remove everything that node was going to be for one of my future builds, and replaced it with a niche, borderline useless node that relies on armor stacking, which is... Armor's kind of... From my experience, armor is basically the worst type of defense, but I'm sure if you can stack it in effectively enough, you can still make it work. But from what I've seen, armor is definitely not really worth investing too much in. So the thing is that all of my future plans that I wanted, builds that I wanted to work towards, were pretty much either nerfed in such a way that I can't even play them anymore, or they're definitely not really useful anymore. And I was thinking of maybe doing a deep delving character, and they nerfed deep delving by making fractured fossils borderline useless. So, on top of that, most deep delvers use mines, and I really didn't want to use mines again. So overall, this league has really been just... I have just been really unmotivated to play Path of Exile, because on top of all the nerfs, they pretty much gutted Harvest. I mean, we'll of course see how effective or ineffective it is as the league goes on, but from the sound of the nerfs, they pretty much gutted that whole mechanic. So, like, all of this stuff combined together, while also not really adding anything really intriguing to me, I've just been really unmotivated to play this game. And so, in all honesty, this was the very first league that I genuinely thought of just skipping the league, which is just something that I haven't done for a very long time. I don't think I've skipped a league since before 3.0, or at the very least early version 3 updates. So this has really been interesting, to say the least. So with that, I kind of wanted to make another video of putting my thoughts out of all of the balance changes and everything. And the problem is that when I tried recording it, it ended up being over an hour long, and also it was very unfocused compared to my Harvest discussion. So I was going to have Warmonger look over it and see what he thought of what I said, and whether or not I'm going to re-record that. I didn't think that people would want to watch an hour of me rambling about balance changes and patch notes. So, with that being said, though, the Ultimatum League mechanic itself looks to be really fun as long as it continues to be balanced in maps. And surprisingly enough, this has been pretty much the first league mechanic that I can actually interact with in early game, because most league mechanics are so imbalanced in the early game that it's not usually worth bothering with until fairly late in the acts, or early mapping is when you start interacting with it, for me personally anyway. So with that being said, we'll see if I end up uploading that or re-recording that or whatever, but as of right now, the league mechanic itself is really good, but all of the balance changes around this league has been really sapping any motivation that I had to really bother playing with it. So we'll see how that goes. With that being said, though, thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day, and I hope that you enjoy Ultimatum League despite all of the changes.